what was it like writing on Family Guy that was starting out when it came back after it had been canceled?
It was awesome because like in Hollywood, you just don't have like this idea of job security. Like any show you're going to write on, you're kind of like 80 to 90% sure it's going to fail because just most shows do. But with Family Guy, it was different because it had been canceled twice already. And then, there was this groundswell from the fans who bought DVDs and watched it on Comedy Central. And so when they brought it back, we were all thinking to ourselves, like, okay, they're not going to cancel it again.
They can't.
They'll just basically be saying that they're idiots and they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So when we assembled to write that again, I just remember this feeling of like, I can only compare it to like what I would imagine when like a Roman legion would return to Rome after a victorious battle and they're walking through the city gates and people are throwing, rose petals at them. It felt like that, except writing fart jokes for Stewie.
Speaking of writing, though, I mean, was that writing room much different than the previous writing rooms you were in, or was it about the same?
Well, it's interesting. It was different in that it was bigger. It was probably twice the size, at least, of any writer's room I had been in before.
Even SNL's?
What's that?
Even compared to like SNL's?
No. SNL's was very big.
Yeah.
But SNL, they have a different process. Again, they don't sit in the room and write and pitch on stuff together. They're very cliquey. They'll go off and writers will work with one actor or, or vice versa. So they were kind of closed into their offices all the time. Whereas Family Guy, you're in the arena, all the time. It's all like a constant. And that was the way it felt too at the beginning, because in the best possible way, it was an incredibly mean room. Like
that's great.
You could not, like one of my friends who writes on staff came in one day and he was wearing like a train conductor's hat, like one of those things. And like he was wearing it like unironically. The amount of shit he got that day, like I thought he was gonna like cry and maybe leave town. Like just there was another guy who came in one time with just simply like kind of like a Newsies cap, and he's like a little older of a guy. The amount of flack that people get for doing shit like
that's
that.
Awesome. You guys are a bunch of jackals. That's so great.
That's great.
It's so fun. And like, it really kept you on your toes, and it was a very fun place to work.
So that leads me to the next question. So with there's with comics, there's not much is sacred, right? So with a show like Family Guy, like things are already pretty on edge, especially for TV and stuff like that. So I'm wondering, like, what's the room like as far as like is everything goes? Is there anything off limits? Do people get offended, or is it just kind of wild west?
I would say it's changed a little bit over time as the culture has moved and shifted, itself. I think that, listen, we're still at the asshole edge of it, but I think that asshole edge has moved into like a nicer place now in 2021.
What's 2022?
2022, right. So, but back when we started, nothing was off limits. Like everything, like one of the funniest, longest runs we ever went on is, I don't know if the name Pat Tillman means anything to you, but Pat Tillman was an NFL player. And then, so 9/11 happened and everybody, decided we needed to go to war in the Middle East. And Pat Tillman left his football team to go to war and was like revered as this hero. And so he gets killed, which is tragic. Like he gets killed in the war, but then the story kind of leaks out that like, it was like, whoops, we accidentally killed him ourselves. Like he was shot by friendly fire. So we did this long run with Peter Griffin being in the war in Iraq, and the sergeant like barking out orders to a platoon. And Peter just kept saying, the sergeant would be like, okay, man, we're going to wake up at 6 a.m. we're going to take that enemy bunker. And Peter's like, okay, got it. Wake up at 6 a.m., shoot Pat Tillman in the head. And he's like, no. We don't shoot Pat Tillman in the head. We're taking the enemy bunker. And like, it was just a very long, drawn out version of that. And so the thing was making us laugh so much, and it actually got animated. It didn't make it into the show because the censors were like, no fucking way. But it made it like into some weird extras like pocket where you could kind of see it. And then one day, the Pat Tillman's brother like called us up to tell us how much he enjoyed it, and his reason was because he felt like the government was really trying to kind of cover its own ass in that, and the fact that we kept saying that he was shot by his own people was like he was like happy that people were remembering that story. But that was particularly mean. We were obviously also on the leading edge of making 9/11 jokes because we started up again in 2004. So 9/11 is not that long ago at that point. And we instantly, Seth, has his own 9/11 story. I don't know if you know that piece of folklore about him. But
no, we don't.
He was 5 minutes late to one of the planes.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. I forgot.
They didn't let him on. They didn't let him on the plane. So we all have careers now because of that. But so God, Seth was always kind of weirdly into like 9/11 humor, because I think that it helped him like deal with his fear of like, what, holy fuck, look what almost happened. But we were telling 9/11 jokes since like 2004 or 5.
That's cool. So why do you think things have changed so much? Is it because of like the pressure from the internet and like how everything in the culture has changed as well?
I think, and like I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. Like I think comedy and stuff like that has changed through the years all the time. Like whether it be like the comedy of the 30s and 40s didn't work in the 60s, and like the comedy of the 60s and 70s didn't work in the 90s when things were getting a little more progressive, like even then. And now obviously today the country is going through another one of these, sort of a social change. And of course there are sometimes when I am saddened by the loss of words that you can no longer say and jokes that you can no longer do. But I also think that it's all like for the best. Like, there you can't, like, you just can't be a total dinosaur and still stay relevant. So, and also I think as the writers' rooms change, your writers' room gets more diverse. It's filled with more women and more people of color, which is good because it gives you extra funny points of view that I wouldn't have. Like, I don't know a black man's experience in this country, and I don't know a woman's experience. So you get all these different voices who can add funny jokes. But along the way, you also have to be mindful of like, oh, this isn't a room filled with like 17 dudes anymore, white dudes anymore. So I can't just like, I can't make it like the frat house, of 2000. Right. But I think it's all good. And especially if you're a real comedy writer, you can always adjust to
right. Absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, the edge has kind of changed, but it's still a safe space to go to the edge.
Totally.
Maybe fall off a few sometimes.
Yeah. Always. And that's a good thing about our room still, is that even if people go over the line in pitching certain jokes or going for certain topics, we don't have a room where it's like you're going to be shamed or canceled or whatever the fuck. It's like you can try stuff, and if it's over the edge, then now there are just more people to tell you that that's over the edge.
Were you guys getting a lot of like pressure from like network guys over the last couple of years because of all that like cancel culture and all that, or were they kind of still letting you guys do what you wanted to do?
No, I think if anything, the network wanted us to keep pushing, because
really?
I think the network understands like how Family Guy is popular and how Family Guy continues to make them money. Mm-hmm. And so they don't want to fuck with that. Like if it were up to them, like, they would let us say the shit we said 20 years ago. But I think that they're fine as long as we can continue to kind of like push buttons and, as we go.
Come join the conversation, the show that you've been wanting. Keep it real with no filter. Weekly we share discussions. WWSD, interviewing creative guests, talking the creative process and sharing all the influences from TV and film. Emmy nominated and winning, yeah, they coming through. Actors and comedians too, directors and writers, way more than a few. Masters of their craft, yes. Tune in, you gotta see. This the podcast that you need. WWSD.